Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming, guys. Whether you're watching us on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, and today I'm also broadcasting on my personal Facebook profile. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live stream, guys. And I apologize for coming a little bit late for a technical issue. And today we have Benjamin Rubinstein, journalist and geopolitical expert, with me. He's an American journalist. I think you're still based in Latin America, right? If you don't want
That's correct.
to.
Yeah, Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. Okay. I hope you're doing well. And I hope Nicaragua is treating you well. I think it's a moment of pride to live in Nicaragua, right?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. Just, the other day, aside from the ICJ court case, which has applied a significant amount of diplomatic pressure on Germany to reduce their arms sales to Israel, me and my family were downtown Managua, and we drove by Pista Gaza, which is a road a brand new road that cuts through basically the center of the capital city, and they named it after Palestine, and it leads to Parque de Palestina. So it was quite fantastic. Yeah, it is. There is definitely a sense of pride to call this place my home.
It literally sounds the opposite of Germany, where I live in at the moment. And if you say you are against killing of children now in Gaza, I mean, it's going very extreme here in Germany, unfortunately. And so much of many people are afraid to speak up. Even German people are afraid to speak up for the Palestinians nowadays, in fear of losing their jobs, their reputation, and social pressure, government pressure, media pressure. There's so many factors in it. Ben, if you allow me to call you Ben, you published recently a fascinating 15-minute video presentation. I was fascinated by it, to be honest with you. I watched it 3 times, and there's so many.
Wow,
it has so many, in my opinion, information and also entertaining at the same time. So I truly believe that this was really one of the best videos that you published for some time. And this video is titled "Israel is Collapsing and America Will Suffer the Consequences." And I truly found it, as I mentioned, informative and entertaining at the same time. Now, before we discuss the U.S. and Israel, those are 2 separate cases, but at the same time, they are interconnected. Can you please walk us through the stages of a rising empire? When there is a rising power and turning into an empire, what are the factors of a rising empire and the common factors? How do they collapse? You mentioned, for example, the Roman, the Byzantine, and the Ottoman empires, and how they collapsed.
One of the prime factors of a rising empire is overinvestment in military, because what that ends up doing inevitably is putting the money that could be going towards the citizens into helping establish colonial outposts. And the going logic among imperialists is that once they have these colonies, they will provide them with more cash for the homeland, and all is well that ends well. However, that is rarely what happens, and at least in the modern era, it has happened in the past. I guess, the French Empire, which no longer exists. I mean, West Africa is just breaking out of their financial system, kind of like as we speak. And that empire hasn't been around for some time now. So definitely overinvestment in military is one. Diplomatic sort of a sort of polarizing of internal politics, I would say, is also another one. And that basically is kind of similar to what we see in Israel right now. Israel has always been polarized between the Palestinians and the Israelis, but the internal polarization of the Israeli government is starting to. And I believe that Israel is trying to establish its own empire and break free of the United States, which is why I bring that up. And so I guess another point would be just like waging wars, not only just investing in the military, but waging wars itself.
And that brings the overexpansion of any empire, right? Like when they overstretch around the world.
Yeah, exactly. I guess a lot of times there's some sort of supremacy going on among ethnic groups and religions. You saw that especially with the Third Reich and their empire. So there are numerous sort of signs of that level one of a burgeoning empire that are identifiable. There are far more. I don't know if we have time to go into them all, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the domestic factors, also the turbulences in the empires, also always play a factor. And sometimes when an empire feels like their powers are shrinking, they if they don't find an external enemy, they find an internal enemy. For example, when the Ottoman Empire, before they collapsed, they found the Armenians as an enemy and they committed the genocide against the Armenians. It feels like they start eating their own people at some point. Interestingly, I call myself personally the US an empire. And it's not like a traditional empire as we know it in the past. This is a modern type of empire. It has different, as I believe, it has arms and legs, and it's like an octopus around the world, like, you know. And I think this is attributed to Professor Chomsky. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on this, but I think he said it once that the Americans do not know that their country is an empire, and they don't know that they don't know, right? Like they don't know that they
Sounds like
don't
something you would say, yeah.
yeah.
But it's also true. It's also
Why do you
true.
think this is an empire?
Why do I think the United States is an empire? Because we control the number of countries. I mean, you could even say all of Europe is a colony. Because and you can see it in how they take orders from us, and you can, you know, one example we already spoke of is Germany, right? Germany, while the case itself hasn't been like shut down entirely by the ICJ, what Germany has done is they've drastically reduced their arms exports to Israel since the case was launched, from about like 200 million to like 1 million or something like that. But who's trying to apply sanctions in response? Is it Germany or is it the United States? It's the United States. Germany isn't trying to sanction Nicaragua. Now the United States, in response to this ICJ case, is. So that shows who Germany's father is. And another, you know, unforgettable example with Germany is what happened with the Nord Stream pipelines. Look, Germany is a U.S. colony, and it's been that way since the fall of the Third Reich and the fall of the Iron Curtain. And so Germany, you know, Germany knows who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. I mean, they're not stupid. And what did they do? And who suffered the most from the Nord Stream pipeline? Was it Russia or was it Germany? It was Germany. Russia's doing just fine right now. And
but,
you know, not only
Germany says Nicaragua. I mean, who is Nicaragua to bring them to the ICJ? This is the type of rhetoric I heard on mainstream outlets.
You're going to get me heated with a question like that.
I mean, this is what they say. They say. I mean, they say. I'm truly truthful now. Like when I watched the German mainstream media, and because I was interested to know what they're speaking, and there was a scripted narrative, and that is like, who is Nicaragua? Why would we even care about what Nicaragua thinks of us? They are less of us, basically, and they are abusers of human rights. And they mentioned that the president of Nicaragua is himself is abusing the human rights in his own country, right?
Well, he's not. I mean, I don't say that much. I've been here for just about 3 years. You know, I'm a journalist and I've seen zero human rights abuses. Yeah, there are people, and you know, when they talk about human rights abuses, they always talk about, and I'm sorry if we talk about this for a little bit. They're always talking about the Catholic Church. And how there's no freedom of expression, but that's just completely ridiculous. They do arrest some religious leaders, but those religious leaders always happen to be trying to overthrow the government, which is illegal in any country. For example, you know, just in August 2022, I believe, they put Bishop Rolando Alvarez on house arrest. And all over social media, there were accusations that people were going into churches and burning them down, and the police weren't letting church service go on for the day. And they arrested the bishop, and for no reason, right? And so I traveled to Matagalpa while all that was happening. And when I arrived in Matagalpa and went to his former church, because he's no longer overseeing that church, it is still a church. The church itself had zero police presence on the ground. It was brimming with people. It was overflowing because it was a holiday weekend for in celebration of the Virgin Mary. I traveled around all of the city of Matagalpa, and there were minimal police. There was one area with a decent amount of police presence, and that was where they had the bishop on house arrest. Now, to make a long story short, while I was visiting a elderly resident of Matagalpa who I had some mutual friends with, she told me that Alvarez had tried to convince his church attendees to march to his house, and where he was on house arrest, and free him from the police. The cardinal told him no, he couldn't make that call. While I was at that same house, I witnessed churchgoers going from house to house in the rain, and I have a video of this online on my Twitter. Celebrating the Virgin Mary, singing, handing out candies, and that kind of thing. And obviously no police presence whatsoever. So people, and that's just one example, but, that man called Bishop Rolando Alvarez the day or a couple days before that happened. He took to 7 of his radio stations because he had control of 7, and called for people to basically overthrow the government. So he got arrested. And yeah, well, I believe he's no longer in prison because Nicaragua tends to arrest these kinds of people and then release them. Historically, they sent 220 prisoners back to the United States. I say back, but to the United States, including people who were convicted of violent crimes in the 2018 USAID-backed coup attempt, where for those who don't know Nicaragua, they funneled like $500 million into NGOs to try to create propaganda and convince people to partake in these sort of violent tranques where they set up roadblocks throughout the country to shut the country down, and were killing police and things like that.
This is one of the arms of the U.S. empire, right? These NGOs.
And so now, NGOs, you need to say where your money's coming from or you get shut down, and it just so happens a lot of them didn't want to say.
Yeah. It just strikes me how many people that I know personally, they are against this new law, for example, in Georgia, the foreign agent law, which asks the organizations to reveal the source of the money of these organizations, and they call it the Russian law. And it's like literally the same law exists in the United States, right?
Yeah, everywhere, basically. Everywhere who doesn't want to have a revolution funded by other governments on their hands. But, I will say stay tuned for more stuff about that, because I can't say much, but there's some stuff coming, I think, about Georgia.
Cool.
That some folks might be interested in.
Ben, in the video that you published, you mentioned that when empires collapse, they start losing their colonies. For example, the Roman Empire lost Spain and other colonies. You said Israel is an American colony and it's going to suffer the consequences. How do you think that Israel is going to suffer if the American power shrinks in the near future?
Yeah, so as I went into significant detail about why the America is already suffering significantly and will soon be unable to support its colonies without creating significant social unrest. Israel, very well, Kevork, they are on they are taking it from all fronts, and they're trying to pretend they're not. They're taking it from the Houthis, who are economically strangling them. They're taking it from Hezbollah, who are actively decolonizing Palestine. Actively, they've kicked out over 70,000 settlers in the north, and that's at least 70,000 settlers since the war began. And as I said,
200,000 now.
200,000. Okay, so my number, when I researched that, it was a couple weeks
crazy
ago.
number.
They
it's
move
crazy
quicker.
number.
And not only that, but the IDF, they're hiding their deaths of the IDF in the north, and so 200,000. That is a huge number, far greater than 70,000, and that is an active, material, tangible decolonization process that is happening. So I think it was Samsung, correct me if I'm wrong, who just pulled out of their technology and innovation center in Israel. So they're facing it economically. They're facing it in the north through Hezbollah. They're under threat of, if they step too far out of line, more actors will get involved. They've really been isolated diplomatically from the world. If you look at the most recent vote, I think it was to give Palestine rights at the United Nations. It was about, I think, 144 countries voted in favor of Palestine, where 25 abstained and 9 said no. Well, that's diplomatic isolation on an international level, because Israel later, I don't know if you saw the crazy video with the ambassador to Israel, to the United Nations, went on to the podium at the UN with a little mini Alibaba paper shredder, and he fed it on camera in front of the entire United Nations. He fed the shredder, the paper shredder, the Charter of the United Nations on camera. He said, "This is what you're doing," but in reality, this is just sort of a colonial outburst from Israel, that they are now being diplomatically isolated. So currently Israel has enough weapons to just go into Rafah, thanks Joe Biden. And supposedly Joe Biden has stopped those weapons shipments, but they've already admitted, I believe it was in the New York Times or Washington Post, where they said that, they already have enough to do with a Biden insider said this. So, if they get their arms shipments cut off by Joe Biden, I'm skeptical if he'll really follow through with that. Maybe he'll have a brain aneurysm, coincidentally, if he tries to. They'll go into Rafah. They'll continue their diplomatic isolation. There's rumors that Egypt might even cut off diplomatic relations right now. Sisi has said that Rafah is a red line. It seems that they're still going to do it, and this is sort of an arrogance, of a colonial arrogance, and an ethnic supremacist arrogance that's leading Israel to believe that they can just do this without consequences, or to not care about those consequences. So, the further Israel goes down the Gaza genocide path, the more they're going to be diplomatically isolated, the more the U.S. is going to be less seen as a leader in the world. And people will continue to look for alternatives. And they've started to do that. And, I mentioned Niger in the video as well. Niger just kicked the French and now the United States out. They're turning to Russia and China and Iran. There was apparently a secret report that just came out the other day that my friend in Iran shared, that apparently Iran is now trying to buy uranium to make that tasty old yellow cake from Niger, because Niger used to supply France with a huge amount, almost all of their uranium at a discount price. So now they're looking for other buyers. So you have this moving away from the U.S. and Israel happening as a result of this, and it is creating sort of a feedback loop of deterioration, not only in the colony but the motherland as well.
So This is my take on Israel. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you agree with me or not. The state is based on three pillars. One is the military might, which has created an enormous deterrence against vis-a-vis its enemies. And this deterrence has vanished. It started in 2006. The first step was in Lebanon when they had to withdraw from Lebanon. And now, after October 7, this deterrence has been destroyed two times, one by Hamas on the settlements around the Gaza Strip, and the second one was by Iran. So Israel doesn't have the upper hand militarily in the region anymore. And this is
Yeah,
very
I would
dangerous
just
for
say
them.
that it was three rounds of the deterrence breaking, possibly even four because of Hezbollah and the Houthis as well.
Yes, yes. So if the deterrence is gone, so this was the first pillar that Israel used to stand on, deterrence, and this is basically purely based on military might. Now, when we see the experts and the officials of Israel speak about deterrence, they always refer to nuclear weapons. And if Iran goes nuclear, then it's a tit for a tat. Israel will no more have even the nuclear let's say, capacity to threaten the neighbors. The second one is that because of this, how is this deterrence is established? Basically by American support, mostly by American support. So these are the two elements that bring the third pillar of Israel, and that is it's a safe haven for the Jewish people around the world, right? This is the concept of Israel. Now, if the United States empire, the might of the United States empire diminishes, this will reflect negatively on Israel's military power and hence its deterrence capacity, right? So Israel, in my opinion, is an existential threat. I truly believe that. And if Israel is an existential threat, how do you see the future of the state of Israel? Because you have a state, you have a government, you have state institutions. Whether you accept it or do not accept it, it's a de facto state, right? How do you see the future of the state in Israel or Palestine, or call it regardless of the names, right? And what would be the future of the Jewish people living in Israel? This is an important question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Kevork. So I see it going one of two ways. Either Palestine is liberated or Israel breaks free of the United States colonial dominance, oversees its sort of colonial transference to a stronger sense of autonomy, and tries to take Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and the entire Lebanon, of course. And try to establish like a greater Israel project, which they, already have attempted to do with the Golan Heights.
Mm-hmm.
If Palestine is liberated or liberates itself, which I do have hope for and I believe will happen, I think it could happen in a number of ways. I think a highly likely way is that a two-state solution happens. And not that I support a two-state solution, but I believe the two-state solution would be the first step in a line of a path of what could come next. And so a two-state solution, of course, this won't solve all the issues by any means. Israel will give it kicking and screaming, perhaps literally, or with guns and bombs. But so you'd probably end up having these two neighboring states, Israel, Palestine, at war with each other. Palestine would start getting funding on a whole greater level, and so there would be, if there were two states, there would be a war. It wouldn't involve peace, and if it did involve peace, it would be very short-lived. And I do believe that most of the world stands with Palestine, and that the pressure on Israel would to actually sort of just dissolve itself would significantly increase. I've advocated for a Nuremberg-style trial. For those who don't know what Nuremberg is, it was the trial for basically the Nazis after the Second World War, and world powers came together: Stalin, Churchill, the United States and decide what to do with the Nazis, with the German Empire, with land, everything. And so I think that sort of scenario led by regional states, including Iran, possibly Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, etc., all of them. I think that would oversee the dissolution of Israel, the trial and conviction of Zionist war criminals, and that would lead to Palestine having a state. And because of Palestine's elevated status in the world and global popularity, I believe that Palestine would be put in a position of significant strength. Now, this could happen over the course of 100 years, or it could happen over the course of 10 years, right? And so with this significant strength, this significant economic investment going into Palestine, just the overwhelming support for the cause in general, this could elevate Palestine to a status so high above its neighbors in in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt. And while those states are all suffering from various economic issues, from their own sort of destabilization for various reasons, it's possible that Palestine could offer to create sort of a confederation. So sort of like a United States of the Holy Land, and just bring everyone in together. That's the ideal. Either that or Israel does the same thing, perhaps by force.
Ben, this question is a little bit complicated. And I truly think of the day after this war in Gaza. And I also wish that the criminals would be held accountable. I don't have high hopes, but I also see that Israel in an existential threat. I already mentioned that. But I do care about the Jewish people in Palestine or in Israel. And I do see that there is increasing grievance now against them, those who are living in on Palestinian territories or in Israel, etc. You yourself, you're a Jewish journalist, and you do not see that the Jews need a land for themselves to live in peace or in security. Is this the concept that you believe, that the Jewish people do not need a state to live in peace, and now that Israel has jeopardized the security of the Jews?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Israel is the least safe place in the world for Jews, ironically. While they, preach that it's the opposite, that if you're a Jew, you're not safe if you go there. But, the fact of the matter is Zionism is a relatively new ideology. It was created in the late 1800s, I believe, sometime in the 1890s by Theodor Herzl, who had zero popularity for his idea. It gained a little more popularity after a Jewish French officer was wrongly accused and then made a hero and of like killing somebody in France. So the Zionist movement gained popularity through stages, but it really didn't have any popularity. It was sort of a cultish tribe in Judaism until the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And it was before then that Jewish people, at least Jews in Europe, were nomadic for 1,000 years. They weren't indigenous. They aren't indigenous. 1,000 years is sort of far more than enough time to shed your indigeneity and adapt the cultures to the cultures of the of wherever you are at the time. And Jews have always made their homes wherever they existed. Ethiopian Jews. There were Yemeni, Iraqi, Iran. There are plenty of Iranian Jews.
Yes.
And who celebrate in peace. So Jews are known to be able to, and they're all not just one ethnic group. Like, sure, a lot of European Jews are Ashkenazi, but they're not all Jews are not Ashkenazi. So I think Jews should have stayed in Europe. I think they should have stayed in Europe after the Holocaust, and they should have helped rebuild. They should have been given Ukraine, perhaps. And we wouldn't be having the same problems with Ukraine that we are having now, or Germany even. and helped rebuild. I mean, after the war, Germany was in a horrible state, and they could have helped rebuild. Instead, they were sent to Palestine. Some of them not willingly, actually. A journalist, Yasha Levine, has done some great work on how Jews were actually forcefully, a lot of Jews, not all, a lot of Jews were actually forcefully exported to Israel. So fast forward in the future, collapse of Israel, what happens with the Jews? I don't believe that Jews who are going to lay down their arms and say, I can live in peace with my brothers in Palestine, my Muslim brothers, because that's really what Jews and Palestinians are. They're brothers or cousins. And a lot of Palestinians will say that if you talk to them. And anti-Zionist Jews feel the same way. So I think that, Israelis who are willing to forsake their supremacy, who are willing to lay down their arms, do not need to leave and will be fine living. Also give back the land if you stole it recently. Anytime within the last 75, 76 years, if you stole somebody's house, give it back to the family because they're asking for it, and that's the right thing to do. So those people could live, and I think that they could even form a part of the government. It just couldn't be the entirety of the government. It would need to be a certain select amount of participation. They'd have to live with their Palestinian brothers in equality. And that's the ideal. I think those who couldn't live without the sense of supremacy, who didn't want to give back their homes, who didn't want to lay down their arms, they could face trial if they're war criminals, if they've committed significant crimes, or they could go to the United States. They could go to Europe. Europe has a lot of countries, and most of them are very welcoming to Jewish people. And they could also go to Russia. Russia's role in the creation of the Zionist state, I mean, while they have certainly changed their minds as of late, but Stalin did play a role in the creation of Israel. And for that reason, there have been strong ties between Israel and Russia for decades and decades. It's only within the past 5 or 6, 7 years in Russia itself and Moscow itself, where it was normal or okay to speak out for Palestine. But there are still some old timers. Even Lavrov himself, the likely incoming foreign minister, re-entering the position, huge Zionist, but they've changed because they don't think that what's happening has an excuse. So, there are plenty of places for Jews to go, including staying in Palestine if they can live in peace. I don't believe there would be some mass genocide of Jews. I don't think that that a state would not be getting off to a very good start if they were to do that. And I think it's more than likely that Israel will ultimately be dissolved through international pressure. And of course, facing internal pressure from internal resistance to the occupation, sure. But I think it'll go in much the same way that the Soviet Union did. While Israel isn't an empire, the Soviet Union also had a significant nuclear arsenal and collapsed regardless.
Yeah. Ben, I have Jewish friends in Syria, and
I think I spoke to one time
the thing is, when you follow mainstream media, they tell you in entire Syria there are 10 Jews left. It's like, bro, myself, I know 10 people. Are they the only 10 people left, and I know them all? It's like,
wow, man.
Awesome. And I'm an advocate for the return of the Syrian Jews. Mostly are settled now in the United States, and some of them have returned to visit their homeland because Syria was their home, and many of them were really positively surprised how the people and the government in Syria were embracing them. It's like, you're Syrian. Your roots are Syrian, right? Like, you're safe here,
Yeah, and Jews make their home wherever their families are from, wherever they choose to go. Sort of like I have in Nicaragua. But Syria, of course, I mean, Jews in Syria, thousands of years, Kevork. They've been there for thousands of years, literally.
Exactly. And one of my friends, he sent me a photo from Damascus wearing the kippah, and he told me, I feel safer in Damascus wearing the kippah than in the United States. And this is a point that I would like to ask you, because I saw a few posts of you, warning of people who say they are pro-Palestine and at the same time they are very anti-Jewish. And I'm not saying anti-Zionist; they are very anti-Jewish. And I don't mention names, but I saw some of your posts in this regard. And now some of these people say this is their argument that there is a Jewish conspiracy, and I would like your thoughts on this because they say that the people who hate the Jews for being a Jew, right? They say that after October 7, the Jewish people have divided themselves into two parts. One is arch Zionists. So if the Zionism project prevails, the Jewish people also continue and keep their supremacy. This is according to them. And if the Zionist project fails, then you have a considerable number of influential Jewish people who have chosen to be against Zionism. And they are the ones who are going to save the Jewish communities by saying that not all the Jewish people were for genocide in Gaza. So they continue the supremacy of the Jewish people around the world. They believe that the Jews control everything and everywhere. So deliberately, the Jews have divided themselves into two parts. One is pro-Zionism and one anti-Zionism. And he mentions, or they mention, Finkelstein and Aaron Matte's father, and so many other
Holocaust survivor.
Yeah. Liam Pepe, for example. So many people that they say that this is a deliberate conspiracy from the Jews to prevail at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. So, Jews are not a monolith. Most Jews are Zionists, but there are actually a lot more evangelical and Catholic Zionists than there are Jews. For me, the issue isn't Jewish people. There are poor Jewish people. I didn't grow up poor, but I wasn't like some of my cousins, to say the least, who were Zionists. So I view Zionism as a class thing. There are no anti-Zionist billionaires, and there are anti-Zionist poor Jews. I never got a penny of reparations from the German state, as you may have heard me say. I mean, they don't give, they give it to Israel, right? And that is anti-Semitic because that now they're backing an occupation and saying it's penance for the Holocaust, but backing a genocide rather. But Jewish people, as I said, we're not a monolith, and I think that there are definitely true believers in that, despite them being like Catholics, who have far more, maybe they should worry about get their own house in order, because there are far more Catholic Zionists than there are Jewish Zionists by tens and tens of thousands, because there are far less Jews in general. And so, there are Jews in position of power in Hollywood and in the banks, and there are almost every congressperson has been bought out by AIPAC, and that's true. But Jews are not like in some grand cabal. Jewish Zionists who see what I say on Twitter and other places, they call me a capo, a Nazi prison guard. They call me a kike. They call me a traitor. They tell me I should go fight in Gaza alongside the resistance, which is another way of saying, die. And so, it's hard to talk to those people aside from just presenting an anti-Zionist Jewish case. For example, just me saying something like, I don't believe in Israel's right to exist, which I don't, can be a powerful antidote to that anti-Semitism. But the point that I would really want to stress here is that Israel actually benefits from this anti-Semitism. And I did say that Israel is the most, least safe place, but they're also the most anti-Semitic. Israel needs anti-Semitism, and not just towards Palestinians, because they're Semitic too, of course. But Israel needs anti-Semitism to justify itself. To say Jews need to come here because this is the only place they're safe. Without that anti-Semitism, Jews will stop going to Israel. And so that anti-Semitism helps Israel legitimize itself. It's one of the core pillars of Israel's legitimacy, or perceived legitimacy, I should say. So I think that perhaps the average everyday member of the group you're referring to, who has started to attack me quite a bit,
I saw.
perhaps the average everyday member of the group is simply misled and doesn't understand sort of the complex material machinations of the global elite. But I'm not so sure about their leader. I think that their leader is. I know you said you don't want to name names. I'm tempted to just. I think that their leader.
I still follow them, by the way. I still follow them because I want to know what they write and I want to know what they say about different things. And
Me too.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really want to hear their perspective. But I totally agree with you that Israel needs anti-Semitism to justify itself. And I also believe that there are hardcore Zionist influencers on X. They are deliberately presenting bad idea about the Jewish people as collective, about the Jews, and they give they make all the stereotypes about the Jewish people like come true by their posts, right? And they're literally trying to provoke everyone and turn the people against the Jewish people. This is deliberate. People need to understand that they post this because they're paid, and they're paid to post this stuff to cause anti-Semitism. And after October 7th,
we've had a number of people come out and say like that. Yeah, Israel pays me to be pro-Israel online. I mean, they offer a lot of money depending on your account size to do this.
I mean, can you really say that Rabbi Shmuley, for example, is not paid to?
I mean, of course he was. Rabbi Shmuley is the protege of a former Zionist warlord who is now dead, Sheldon Adelson. Who, and I call him a Zionist warlord because he was responsible for funding, settlements and settlers who are armed and, of course, kill people and take their homes and things like that. So, like, that is who was funding Rabbi Shmuley, quote, Rabbi Shmuley, and now his family is. So.
Yeah, I believe that Rabbi Shmuley posts deliberate provocative posts on X so that the small-minded people would be provoked and start cursing the Jewish people as Jewish people. And they need the negative sentiments, as you mentioned, to justify Israel and also to thrive. This is how they really thrive. And there are so many others. Like I can count countless of these profiles that I see, and I got really sick and tired of them, so I just mute these profiles. I don't want to see their posts, and I don't want to see the people fighting them. Why are you even wasting your time and arguing with these people? It's like they're doing it on purpose so that you post an angry comment on these profiles, right? It's hilarious.
Yeah, well, they do it to me too. They flood my posts on the occasional one that triggers them. But I think from my perspective, it's important to not only to try to, because while the leaders may be ingenuine and paid and attempting to co-opt the Palestinian cause, I think the sort of base of that movement, of their movements, that isn't always the case, and that there are people that you can show the truth, basically. And I don't think we should give up on those people. So it's important for anti-Zionist, hardcore, a hardline anti-Zionist, like Jewish anti-Zionist like myself, to speak out against it. Not just against people like Shmuley, but also people like the movement we've been speaking about.
Yeah. Ben, where can the audience find your work if they want to follow you?
Yeah, so the best place to follow me is on Twitter and YouTube. Both @ are BEN, the letter F, RUBINSTEIN. So that's Ben F. Rubinstein on Twitter and X.
Guys, I attached his X or Twitter account in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. And also his new YouTube channel. You can hit him a follow and watch his work. It's very important to follow independent journalists like Ben. And also informative videos that he's posting on X. It's important, like this more shorter format videos interactive, and you can watch and learn something that would be also really great. Ben, thank you so much for being with me today. We will definitely follow up on these cases. Whenever you post a video, I would like to watch it and also follow up again with you on another live stream. So thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me back, Kevork. Pleasure to be here.
It's great pleasure. Guys, we are around 750 people watching on 3-4 platforms. I would really just appreciate it if you can leave a comment, a like, a share of this content so that more people can reach and watch this live stream and this conversation with Ben. And if you like to support the independent work that I'm doing between Monday to Friday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. Peace be upon you, upon your families, and I will see you tomorrow, Wednesday, again at the same time. Salam.